ये बहुत बड़ा जज्बा है अपने आप को एक साइड पे रख देना और दूसरों की ज़िंदगी के बारे में सोचना।
I was a musician professionally for a very long time. Mom passed away quite suddenly. I was without an anchor. I was very close with my mother, and I was probably really good at this disaster relief work because my life's been a disaster.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, दिस इज़ अब्बास बिलग्रामी, वेलकम टू अपर डेक। आज हमारे साथ एक साहब मौजूद हैं एंड बिफोर आई एम गोइंग टू इंट्रोड्यूस यू टू दिस जेंटलमैन, मैं कुछ बात इस तरह से शुरू करूंगा कि दुनिया में बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं, हमारी आबादी तकरीबन 8 अरब को पहुंच गई है। उनमें से कुछ गिने चुने लोग जो कि दिल रखते हैं, हमदर्दी रखते हैं इंसानों के लिए, जानदारों के लिए, और वो लोग ऐसे हैं जो कि अपनी ज़िंदगी में मुख्तलिफ़ चीज़ें करते रहते हैं जो कि समझ नहीं आता बाज़ दफ़ा कि अपनी ज़िंदगी को किसी के लिए क्यों कैसे लोग रख देते हैं और कहते हैं कि हम इसी दुनिया के लिए लोगों की मदद करेंगे, लोगों के काम आएंगे किसी ना किसी तरह से। मुझे बड़ी हैरानगी होती है जब मैं मिलता हूँ ऐसे लोगों से, क्योंकि ये बहुत बड़ा जज्बा है अपने आप को एक साइड पे रख देना और दूसरों की ज़िंदगी के बारे में सोचना। तो जो साहब हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं आज, उनका ताल्लुक भी इंसानियत की इंसानियत के लिए काम करने से है। इसके अलावा वो बहुत से और काम भी करते हैं। मैं उनकी ज़बानी सुनना चाहूँगा। हमारी ये जो गुफ्तगू होगी वो अंग्रेज़ी में होगी बहुत ज़्यादा, कुछ उर्दू के फ्रेज़ जो उनको पता हैं वो हम कोशिश करेंगे उनसे बुलवाएं। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट एंड आई विल वेलकम मिस्टर Todd Shea.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be here.
It is an honor, and we've been talking a lot before the show, and I know a lot about you, and I wanted to hear it, the first time, but now I knew a little bit about you, so it is easier for me to, take you to different phases of your life, and we'll try to find out how you have reached here and what made you, doing all that. While I was reading about about yourself, and I knew this as well, that you are into music. So first thing first, are you a musician first?
Well, I don't know if I'm a musician first, but I am a musician. And I was a musician professionally for a very long time.
Okay.
And so music has always been a part of my life, a very important part of my life, which I used in the sense of going for the commercial success aspect of it at one time and the artistic aspect. And mostly I use it now to create awareness and get funds for the relief and charity aid work that we do.
Yeah. I mean, in Urdu we say "Mausiki ruh ki ghiza hai." It's like, it's just food for soul. So it's very connected to you as well now then.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
So we'll talk about your music, era, and you're still playing guitar and you're also still singing.
Absolutely.
But before that, I would like to know something about your childhood, where you were born, how was your family, and then to a place where you realize you were born for something to do. So let's start from the beginning, your childhood.
Sure. So I accidentally got into disaster relief work on 9/11, but I think when I went there and I realized I was good at logistics and working in that kind of situation, a lot of people have asked me how I got into that. It was just seemed to be by chance, by fate, that I was in New York on 9/11 to do my music. Mm-hmm. But what I tell people, which I think is true, which I realized a little bit later, is that I was probably really good at this disaster relief work because my life's been a disaster.
Okay.
So when it's a disaster, then you get used to working in a disaster environment. Then when a disaster comes along, you're right, you're in your element.
Absolutely.
So my life started out when my dear mother was about 18 years old.
Okay.
And my father was probably about 22. So they were very young. They were,
And you're
and-
the eldest son?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was there first.
Okay.
And in fact, they were together, and by the time they got married, my mom was already a few months pregnant with me.
Okay.
So March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Oops, that's only 7 months after I was born in September.
Ah.
So they got married because
You did.
she
yeah.
got pregnant.
Okay.
They were two kids, not being particularly smart about birth control. So I wasn't supposed to be, I wasn't their plan. I wasn't
Okay.
intended to be here.
Okay.
So from there, obviously, a marriage happened in that time, 1966, because
Okay.
I'm going to be 57 this year. So in 1966, there was a real stigma attached to, getting a girl pregnant and not marrying her,
Okay.
or so it's almost like they had to get married.
Of course.
And I don't think my father wanted to get married.
Okay.
So I don't think he ever wanted a kid, and I think he resented that. So there was never a close bond there. But I had a very close bond with my mother. I had a fairly normal childhood, but I wasn't really close with my father, who was
And
just
what's your father's?
very emotionally distant.
Profession?
He worked for the government.
Okay.
He was in the Air Force.
Okay.
And then he ended up working in intelligence
Ah.
for the U.S. For the National Security Agency.
Okay.
And his main thing, which he could never talk about his work, so
Of course.
I guess he'd have to kill me if he had told me, which he might have wanted to do. I don't know, but he would go on these long business trips to West Germany
Okay.
and Berlin and these places, and pretty much the only thing I remember from from being a kid was that he would be gone for some periods of time, and
Okay.
he'd come back, and that he was fluent in Russian.
Really?
And he was within that block of National Security Agency employees that was probably looking after the Russia,
So that was during the Cold War.
the Cold War,
Yeah.
Soviet Union stuff.
Okay.
And that's about really all I know,
Okay.
because there's really no detail
And you guys-
that he ever divulged to his family.
You guys were in Washington D.C., right?
We were in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
And he worked at the NSA headquarters
Okay.
in Fort Meade, Maryland. And he would sometimes go down to the Pentagon. So literally, what I've just told you is the extent of knowledge
That's
of
what
what
he-
I know about whatever he did.
Okay.
So if he did anything when it comes to the Soviet Union that would have been newsworthy or would have been something big, I don't know that he was involved in. I don't know, but it's very likely he was,
Must be.
because of what I know about him being in the intelligence analyst business, right? The NSA. 1978, when I was 12 years old,
Right.
my father decided that he wanted to cheat on my mother. So he was cheating on her with some young Air Force girl or something. So my mother became very distressed and despondent and depressed, and started going to see a psychiatrist.
And she was working somewhere as well?
She was working as a receptionist
Okay.
for a electric company.
All right.
But they made lights and lighting fixtures and things like that. Very nice people. And so her bosses were actually, they were survivors of the Holocaust. They were
Oh.
Jewish,
Oh.
and they were survivors of the Holocaust.
Okay.
And they treated my mother like a daughter,
Okay.
and they were very nice to me. So I have good memories of that time.
Okay.
With them. But my mother at that time, she when she was seeing this psychiatrist, he prescribed her Valium to stay calm.
Oh.
And one day, my father and her had an argument. She had followed him and she caught him with this young girl, and they had a fight. And he said he was leaving, and she took the whole bottle of Valium, and then they she was in the hospital for about a week, but the damage had been done and she passed away.
And how old were
She was about 32
32?
years old, yeah, something like that.
And you're the only son, right? Or you have other siblings?
I have a younger sister,
Younger
7
sister.
years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah, and
She must be very young back then.
she was 5 and I was 12. Yeah, so 5, 6 years old. So so after that, after Mom passed away quite suddenly, you know, I was without an anchor. You know, that was I was very close with my mother, and I wasn't particularly close to my father. So
It must be a very difficult time for you.
yeah, yeah. The thing is that my mother had left me 2 things, which one of them is actually foreshadows Pakistan. So she bought me a guitar. She died a month before Christmas that year,
Okay.
but she had bought me a guitar because I expressed interest in guitar and wanted to learn guitar. So she had bought it for me and hid it away, and I was to get it at Christmas, and I did get it. So the other gift was a Rand McNally Atlas of the World, a big red atlas. And Christmas morning when I got that book, and I opened it up to the first page I see, and it was a big map of northern Pakistan and India, the
Really?
Himalaya mountains.
That's how.
Yeah, and when I sat and looked at it, at this first page that I opened in this big atlas, and it was a huge atlas. It was like,
Of course.
you know, one of those big ones. And so I remember seeing this big mountain range, and then a little circle with a star, Islamabad, right at the foot of this mountain range.
And you must have, like, what place is that? I mean,
Yeah, I stared at it for a long time, and believe you me, I had some strange feeling about that place, that it was familiar, that I knew this place. Somehow, this area that
And you were 12.
and I was 12 years old,
Okay.
and I had never heard of Pakistan before and didn't know anything about any of it. But I had this strange sense that a child wouldn't understand, right?
Of course.
So, but the feeling, nevertheless, was there that this place seemed very fantastical
something
and attracting me and somehow connection with my soul, my spirit. So I don't know if that was a foreshadowing that Allah gave me just a little bit of a taste that you will know this place one day. Or, I don't know, right? The universe telling me something
must be.
about my future. But it was definitely there. And then I got this guitar. So my interest in maps and cities and geography and my interest in music,
Started from there.
yeah, and I would immerse myself in those things
Okay.
to get through the day, right? You know, with the situation that I was in I was with a father who was emotionally not there,
Right.
never went out and threw the ball with me or taught me anything
Okay.
or cared. My mother's gone, and I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and eventually the grief that I was experiencing got me into to drugs. So the little girlfriend that my dad had that he was cheating on my mother with, she ended up living at the house just a month or 2 after Mom died. And of course, I didn't like that at all.
Of course.
So I would have episodes of fighting with my father and, you know, really had no respect for him for what he did. He just destroyed his family.
Right.
So it got to the point as I was getting 13, 14, where I would take a guitar and hit him over the head with it or something, you know, which I did do. And so these kinds of things.
Okay.
And I was very hateful towards him. Later, I was more forgiving, you know, that he's a flawed person. But when you're 12 and this happens
course,
to your
I mean, it's
family,
just a strange-
and you don't get, you know, any real support or help anywhere, so I took solace in my guitar
Okay.
and my interests, that things that interested me, and even I would go to school. Like when I didn't want to go to school, I didn't go to school.
Okay.
When I wanted to go to school, it was just to go meet friends and grab a bag of marijuana, charas, and go somewhere and smoke it, right? So I started getting into drugs.
Okay.
So music saved me, but it also got me into where I was playing in rock bands in my teens.
Okay.
And that got me into the drug scene.
Okay.
So unfortunately, because I got really good at playing guitar, like really good, like professional level, where other kids around me were starting to, you know, like respect me, and older kids wanted to hang out with me because
You're
I
a
could
good
play
guitarist.
all of the songs, AC/DC and
Really?
Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and all those things. So I could play them note for note, Van Halen. And so as time went by and I got in more popular bands,
Right.
the drugs and the other things about the rock and roll lifestyle, I'm actually ashamed of a lot of what I got into. I never robbed people. I never stole. I never hurt anybody. I never raped and killed anybody. But I did involve myself in drugs. And unfortunately for myself, being in music, it was free a lot of times.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So I got heavily addicted to cocaine, super addicted to cocaine. And then I started not only snorting cocaine, but I started doing the freebasing, the crack cocaine, which is smoking it. And it's a higher concentration. And it's so addictive, almost like heroin. And once you get addicted to a narcotic like that, most people don't make it out of there.
Absolutely.
You either lose everything you had, and then you end up homeless and dead, or you go to jail,
Right.
or you do something stupid in order to keep your habit going, some crime that you commit and end up in prison the rest of your life. So a lot of my friends didn't make it of that time, and I was very close to not making it. I guess Allah knew that I would be doing humanitarian work someday, because there was 5 or 6 times in my period between, say, 15 and 19
Right.
that I literally had overdosed so much on cocaine that I was laying there thinking my heart is going to explode. I overdosed and I just did too much this time.
Of course.
And I could feel my heart racing and beating to where I thought it was going to pop, And I think only Allah saved me from myself. So there was a time when I was about 19 that I looked at my life and I said, because I was thinking of going out to LA and playing and trying to get in with because a lot of the popular bands were coming out of Los Angeles. And I thought about it, but then I said to myself, even if I go and become in a band and get successful, I am so addicted. And I knew where I had presence of mind enough by the time I was like 18, 19, that I knew I was going to be dead soon or in jail. Like I knew that I too many close calls with overdosing on this drug.
So it was like what, in 80s, early 80s?
This would have been 84.
84
when I graduated high school.
Okay.
And that's another story.
Okay.
So the way I graduated high school was I failed 9th grade. I failed 9th grade again in what would have been my 10th grade year. Okay. And then what would have been my 11th grade year, but was the 3rd time at 9th grade.
Right.
I got locked up for fighting somebody.
Okay.
I got locked up for assault. And when I went in front of the judge, one of my teachers in school who knew about my history with losing my mom, she said, he's a good kid. He's not really a bad kid. He's gotten into these drugs and he's gotten into the bad crowd. But he's not a bad kid. So please don't throw him in a hard jail.
Okay.
So what he did was he said, okay, I'm going to give you one chance. I'm going to send you to a place out in the mountains of Virginia that does camping and hiking for 3 weeks, and then 2 months of school. And then after school, then another 3 weeks of camping and hiking in the mountains. So that's where I developed a love for the mountains and outdoors. But when I was there for 11 months. In what would have been my 11th grade year. Okay. When I went there, you were a ward of the state, but you weren't locked up in a cell. You were living out in the mountains in a cabin with other kids and counselors and people around that were to help you with your problems. So it was troubled teens.
And it helped you to get out of the drugs?
Yeah, because it didn't really, it helped me for a short time. I'll get into that so you'll understand what happened. So while I was there in my 11th grade year, I was not doing drugs that much. Sometimes somebody would sneak something in and we'd do it. But for the most part, I was mostly clean. And I got a lot of mental health help. Okay. And I got strong physically from the hiking. And I made up 9th, 10th, and 11th grades in 1 year. I came back, maybe the only person to have failed 9th grade 3 times and still graduate on time. Oh. So I went back and I graduated. I played football in high school. I dated cheerleader. And I did all that, totally turned around. Instead of having hair down to here, I had short haircut. I looked like a jock and hung out with the jocks. I wasn't particularly good at football, but I made the team, which is for me, that in of itself was almost a miracle. And I hung out with the football players and all that stuff. And like I say, most of them were actually athletes. Okay. And I was just along for the ride. And I had a lot of fun with them. Right. And it was a fun time of my life, except that once that year was over and you go back into life and you've graduated high school, then I went back into music again and got right back into drugs. Again, in the wrong crowd, in the wrong things. So that was when I thought, let me go to LA and try to get in with a big band and try to become famous, you know,
Right.
in the 80s. You know, that's a lot of big bands were coming out during
Bon
that time.
Jovi was there, and
You know, Guns N' Roses and guys who I
Yeah.
met later on in
You
life.
did?
Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, I put Atif Aslam and Guns N' Roses together. They did a little collaboration
Oh.
about 10 years back.
Okay.
But at that time, I didn't know them or any of that.
Of course.
And even now, I don't really know them. But I had some contacts that one of my good friends who I do music with, who was very interested in Pakistan, and he knew all those guys.
All right.
So through that, we put Atif and them together.
Okay.
A guy named Lanny Cordola, who's helping Afghan girls
Okay.
learn how to play guitar and stuff. And another great story, you should have him on. Now he's based here and in LA because he had to leave Kabul when Kabul fell.
of course. Yeah.
But getting back to this whole time in my life where I'm thinking maybe I should go to Los Angeles and try to get into the big rock band scene there, because Washington D.C. was small time for the rock
Either
bands.
New York or LA.
New York or LA, but LA is where it was happening at that time.
Okay.
So I was thinking to go, but then I said to myself, you know what? If I'm bad here with the drugs, when I get out there,
That's the heaven for drugs.
and I really realized that, right? So this big part of me wanted to go there because of the glitz and glam and the rock star lifestyle, and I was good at guitar, so I felt like I could hold my own wherever I went
Right.
as a guitarist. But something kept telling me that I'm going to die, I'll be dead in a year or two, because I'd already overdosed several times, right?
Right.
So I decided to do a total turnaround, and I joined the United States Marine Corps.
And this is totally your inner voice.
Yeah, my inner voice saying to me, I'm not gonna last. And there was a song by Neil Young, Hey, hey, my, rock and roll will never die. There's more to the picture than meets the eye. Hey, hey, my, out of the blue and into the black. Once you're gone, you can't come back. And then there's a part where it says, let's see. My, hey, hey, it's better to burn out than to fade away, right? And I thought, no, I think I'd rather fade away than burn out,
Okay.
right? So there was that whole lyrical miracle there that had some insight, right? So, yeah, I could have, if I had gone to LA, I probably would have burned out.
Of course.
But now I get to fade away, thanks to making the decision to join the Marine Corps instead. So I joined the United States Marine Corps.
You did.
Yeah, but the mistake that I made was that the night before I went into the Marine Corps, see, I had my test for the Marine Corps for drugs, right? They test you.
Okay.
And I'd been clean for
many-
a little while
okay.
because I knew about the test.
Right.
They take a little bit of your blood and a little urine sample. So turns out that I passed the test and I'm on my way. I get on the plane to Parris Island, South Carolina for Marine Corps boot camp training. And we land in South Carolina and we get on the buses and they say, it's time for the blood and urine test again. So they did it again.
Okay.
That night before I went in, after the test that I'd passed,
You thought that's clear.
I thought I'm clean, and my friends held a party for me, a going away party. And they had a little K2 mountain of cocaine on the table. Looked just like K2, and I partook in the drug. So, fortunately or unfortunately, they test you, but then they send, there's hundreds of recruits coming in, right? They send the test to the Naval Observatory in Great Lakes, 1,000 miles away, and there's a backlog, so it takes time.
Right.
So I'm on Parris Island in training, and I'm going through cocaine withdrawal while doing, training, doing the push-ups and learning how to fire your weapon and all the things that Marine Corps training does, which is very tough training. And as most people who are familiar, that the Marine Corps training is like a month longer than any of the other boot camps and other U.S. armed services. And it's an elite, amphibious land force. So they can do air landings, they can do sea landings, they can do, land operations, so they're versed in all areas of
similar
warfare.
to what we do it with our SSGs.
Exactly, and who are amazing.
Yeah.
I know some of them.
Okay.
And worked with the Pakistan Army many times in the last almost 18 years in the disaster zones, and
Right.
and had a wonderful experience working with them. Very competent, and when they said they'd do something, it would be done.
Yeah,
that
that's
that
true.
that was no question about it. That if they said that this will be done at this time, then
They're
you
good at
could
it.
just
Yeah.
set your watch to it and live by that. So in joining the Marine Corps and getting off the drugs, so I was there for about a month and a half.
Okay.
About halfway through training, I'm finally got the drugs out of my system. I'm feeling good, and then
One fine day you get a.
yeah, in the morning,
Okay.
before, they at 5 a.m. every morning or something, they wake everybody up, and within 2 minutes you have to be out of your rack and dressed and ready to go for battle.
Right.
That's how they train you. So you have to have your boots on, you have to have everything. So one night, it was about 10 minutes before everybody was supposed to get up. One of the drill instructors comes in, he grabs me, he goes, Shea, Private Shea, pack your trash, and company commander wants to see you. And I thought to myself, what is this about? Because I thought I was safe, right?
Yeah.
I thought, oh, by now, the test was probably
Right.
just to scare you or to get you to admit it or something, but they don't really do it, right? So I thought, by that time, enough time had gone by where somehow, by some miracle, the test didn't go through, it didn't show up positive for cocaine.
Okay.
So I get my stuff together, and I'm trying to think, why are they calling me in front of the company commander for? And I thought that it might have been because of an incident that happened 2 days before. So a private was standing in line. We had just come out of the sandbox, which is very hot, and you're doing push-ups and exercises in there. And one of the kids was a little overweight, and he was a young African-American fellow.
Okay.
And I saw the eyes roll in the back of his head, and he fell backwards, straight, unconscious, hit his head on his footlocker, and blood started pouring out, and he peed himself. And everybody else stood at attention and wouldn't move. I broke it out of attention, and I started helping him. The drill instructor came over to me and started screaming at me. What are you doing? You get back at attention. And I said, sir, this kid he's injured himself. What the. So I said, no, I'm helping him. And again, he was yelling and screaming at me. And then the other drill instructor is yelling at this kid who's unconscious, who's got blood pouring out of his head. And he's obviously in bad shape.
Of course.
And they were yelling at him to get up. And screaming at him at the top of it. And of course, he was out. He didn't know what was going on. So they finally brought the Navy corpsmen, the medics, and they put him on a stretcher and they took him out. I never saw him again. I don't know if he lived. I don't know if he died. After that, he was out of my life forever. But I thought that I might be getting called in front of the company commander to jump on me for breaking out of attention, that it wasn't my place to go and help. I'm still proud of the fact that I did that. And nobody else did.
Okay.
'Cause that's just how I am. That's how I roll.
Right.
I don't really care about authority that much. If somebody needs help, then damn the torpedoes.
Great.
Full steam ahead. So I get in front of the company commander, and he says, Private Shea. I said, sir, yes, sir. He says, Private Shea, what do you know about cocaine? I said, sir, no, sir. He goes, you know nothing about cocaine? Sir, no, sir. He goes, I think you do.
Right.
And he goes, we got your test back.
Oh.
And it seems like you had quite a bit of cocaine inside you.
Oh my God.
And so he goes, you're out of here. And I thought I was going to get thrown in jail and thrown in the brig.
Right.
They gave me a bus ticket home. That's all they did. They just threw me out. And I was on a bus with a few other privates that had made some kind of mistake or got kicked out. So I get kicked out. And when I'm sitting there, right before I'm getting ready to get on the bus, there's a platoon they call casual platoon. You're in there for a couple of days while they process you out. Then you get on a bus. So while I'm in there, one of my drill instructors, he goes, man, you would have made a fine Marine. He goes, you really screwed up, you dipshit, if I can say that. He goes, and I said, well, sir, I'm sorry, you know, I don't know what to say. I wish they'd give me another chance. I'll never do it again. I said, now I'm feeling good. I got those drugs out of my system.
Right.
And this was like my drug rehab.
Of course,
And he
yeah.
goes, well, the Marine Corps doesn't sign up to be your drug rehab. I said, well, that's what it was. And he goes, let me tell you something, you dumb. He goes, if you'd have just stayed clean until you got in, once you're in, you can do whatever you want.
Oh.
He goes, we're all doing it, but when you get in, you know, so
That is
at that
blessing.
time, you know, that's the deal.
So the party helped you, actually.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you
Well-
could have been into drugs as well.
Who knows what I would have done? Who knows where I would have been? You know, what I would have done if I had stayed with the Marine Corps.
Right.
But as fate would have it, I got kicked out. I went back home. I was clean. I got my head back together.
Okay.
And I never wanted to touch drugs again. And I don't think there was any other thing I could have done to get out of that than something dramatic like joining the Marine Corps.
Wow.
So I had it out of me. I stopped hanging out with those friends. There's a couple that made it out of that I still talked to. But for the most part, I got out of that life. And I stayed away there. I joined a country music band.
Okay.
You know, all the twang and Willie Nelson and all that. So I joined a country band that also played some rock and roll, like Chuck Berry and Lynyrd Skynyrd and stuff like
Okay.
that. So I joined a band that did that. And I was with them for 4 years. We played a couple times at the White House. We played for some events on aircraft carriers and different, opened up for some really big stars.
So White House, like in front of the
The
president?
last year of George Bush and the first year of Ronald Reagan,
Ah,
I played at the White House.
wow.
And met George Bush.
You did?
Yeah, I met George Bush. The first year of Reagan, I didn't actually meet him. But anyway, that's during that time period.
This is the senior
Yeah.
Bush, right?
So we played at their Easter egg event that they have every year, twice there.
Okay.
And so we did a lot of high-profile gigs for a local band and opened up for big stars.
Okay.
So then it was about 1992, and of course, a young lady that I had met while I was playing country music, we got married and had my son, who is 33. Tomorrow he'll be 33.
Hey.
On the 19th, my son Justin.
Okay.
So he's 33 now, but in 1990 he was born. So he would have been about 2 years old when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, to try my hand at writing songs and trying to make it in the music business. So I stayed there for about 2 years, learning how to write music, learning how to read charts and studio record and all those things. And because before I was just playing guitar in live bands, but there I got to learn how to write songs. I learned how the music business works. I learned how to record in the studio. But then after a couple years, I was like, you know what? I've learned a lot here, but I'm really in my heart rock and roll. I'm not really country.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, that's how you
I
sound.
love country.
Right.
I love the people, and I loved playing country music. But deep inside my heart, the stuff
You were
once
a
I
rock
learned,
star.
well, not really a rock star, but once I started writing songs, I realized that the songs that were coming out of me,
They're more towards...
yeah, I would try to write country as a professional. I was writing songs for a music publisher, but when I would write for what I wanted to write,
Right.
the stuff that was coming out was more like Pink Floyd or something, you know. So I thought, you know what? I loved being here in Nashville. It is the coolest little big town I've ever been to.
Right.
It still is. I love the people. I love the vibe. I love the scene. But I left because I wanted to go somewhere where I could sit and just write songs the way with what was coming out of my heart.
Okay.
So I moved to Panama City, Florida, and I got a job playing music, acoustic guitar on a gambling boat.
Oh.
We'd go out into international waters, and I would be playing for the people on the way out, and they're all happy. They're thinking they're going to gamble on the slot machine or blackjack and win.
Okay.
And on the way, and while they were out there gambling, I would just sit and write songs.
Oh.
And I'd sit up on the top deck where nobody was
That's a
at.
great
They were
place to
down in the
write.
casino. I'd have me a nice sandwich or something, and I'd see the sea turtles going by and the dolphins and the fish, and I loved it out there. And I was never into gambling. They tried to get me to gamble one time because the guy that owned the boat thought, if I get this guy hooked on gambling,
So you get
then
the
I won't.
money
Then
back.
all of the money I'm paying him, I'll get it back. I tried it one time.
Okay.
I won about $300. I was about $300 ahead.
That's how they...
Like, this is great. But then I thought, wow, I'm good at this. Then I lost that and another $100.
Oh.
And then I was done with gambling after that. Never gambled again.
Okay.
So I taught my lesson. So I'm writing songs, and I'm on this boat, and I'm making good money, and I'm enjoying. And then on the way back, I was there to cheer up everybody after they'd lost all their money. Like 100 people would be on the boat. About 2 of them would have won.
Of course.
And 98 people were all
So
like,
good audience.
they lost, thousands of dollars or whatever. So then, while I was in Panama City, I joined a rock band, and we played the whole Pink Floyd Wall, the album, live. One of the only bands other than Pink Floyd to have actually done the Wall album live. And we also used the Pink Floyd movie of The Wall as our backdrop, and we synced up with the movie and played it live while the movie was playing. We built a wall just like Pink Floyd did. It was a smaller scale version of the large scale thing that.
But you
that
had
Pink
a good audience there.
We had a beautiful audience. It was one of the triumphs of my musical life.
Wow.
We didn't just have a crowd. We had a crowd of screaming fans that were like so into what we were doing that we almost felt just almost like Pink Floyd themselves.
Do you have those videos?
I have a video on VHS tape.
Wow.
Yeah. I got a video of that. I should put that on digital.
You should.
Sometime. Might have a copyright problem with Pink Floyd. We actually had to pay copyright fees to be able to use the film for our performances. Anyway, I was getting into all this stuff, and I started really enjoying and thinking that I was getting pretty good at writing.
Of course.
So I decided I'll move to New York City. Now, after 4 years in Panama City, it was 1998. I moved to the Hamptons in Long Island and played guitar in little clubs there to support my recording habit, to record new songs.
Yeah.
Started a band called Broken Glass.
Glass.
Yep. Started getting into some magazines. I was on the cover of one national magazine, and I was getting known in New York City area. So I got a record deal. I got a recording deal with Sid Bernstein, the guy that brought the Beatles and the Rolling Stones to America.
Yeah.
He signed me. He liked my music. He was retired at that point.
He must be very old.
He was in his late 80s at that
Right,
point.
yeah.
But still so lucid and so like he would have a radio show, much like what you're doing here, every Tuesday night, I think it was, at 2nd Avenue Deli in New York. And he had me on his show.
Really?
And he was taking me under his wing.
Wow.
So he suggested that we do a gig at CBGB's nightclub, have me come and play, and he would invite all of his record executive friends and all the big record labels. Because he could get on the phone and call Paul McCartney with the Beatles. He had him on speed dial. So he was still that much of a name in the business, even though he's retired and enjoying life with his family.
Yeah.
But he still had all the contacts. So he set up this gig for me at CBGB's, which is a lot of people don't know, but people that know rock and roll history know that the Rolling Stones, Blondie, many punk bands in the 80s and 70s and 80s got their start there. So I was booked there to play a show for all these guys. The show was booked for September 12th, 2001. So I woke up the morning of September 11th, ready to go to the recording studio to rehearse for my big show, my big chance at making the big time.
Yeah.
And I looked out the window of the hotel and I saw the tower, one of the towers on fire. And then I was like, something is very wrong. I turned on the television. And I knew right then that I wasn't going to be going to the recording studio that day. And I wasn't going to be doing music that day or that night because I saw the second plane hit.
Huge. Yeah.
And then saw that tower go up. So I actually went down to Ground Zero and I worked for a week. And I helped firefighters get their supplies as they were sleeping on the sidewalk after having been inside trying to find people for hours, and they were coming out and they were exhausted. I would bring them, along with other volunteers, water and food and medicines or Visine to wash their eyes or their contact lenses, new boots, socks and underwear. Like, we had a whole store at the corner of Church and Liberty, which was right at the scene of the tower's destruction. Yeah.
Okay.
So where we were set up was we made this little store and that we put together. I remember one night we had run out of pain medication, and we were getting a lot of requests for people who had headaches and backaches and aches and pains and stuff like that, who were going in to the wreckage to try to find
Right.
people. So I took my van. In fact, when I first went to Ground Zero, I went down in my van, and I'm this long-haired guy. I have hair down to here.
Oh,
And I drive down to Ground Zero in my van. I unloaded all my music equipment, and I went down. And first I went to Chelsea Piers, where they were they'd set up a disaster coordination center. I
Okay.
went there, and there was a big line of people wanting to volunteer. So I just went to the front of the line real quick. I said, is this the line that I go to if I have a vehicle? I have a van. And she goes, you have a van? I said, yeah. She goes, I need you right away. This lady named Dolores, she grabbed me, and she said, go over here and take the van over here. I parked there. They loaded my van up with fruit, Gatorade, and water.
Okay.
They said one of the fire captains, Captain Greenwood, is down there, and they need hydration. They need to be hydrated. They need water, and they need this right away. So that was my mission. I took 2 U.S. Marines who were they were in civilian clothes, but they were Marines. They came with me to help unload all this stuff.
okay.
So I get down to Houston Street, and they have a checkpoint there, and there's all these vehicles like ambulances and police and then electric company vehicles and all these. And then there's my conversion van.
Okay.
And there's this long-haired guy. So I come up, and the officer goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm here. I said, didn't they radio ahead at Chelsea Piers Disaster Center?
Yeah.
They wanted me to deliver this Gatorade and this water
Right.
for the Captain Greenwood at Ground Zero.
Okay.
And he goes, he had a funny look on his face. He goes, well, pull over there to that alley while I sort this out.
Okay.
I get over there, and we get swarmed by 50 ATF, FBI, all with automatic weapons pointed at me and the other guys. So we get up there, and we're stopped there. And later on, I heard that we actually made CNN. CNN had gotten some report that there was a van that might have a bomb in it.
Oh.
And, so that was actually reported.
Really?
That might blow.
Of course, I mean, they must be scared
Yeah,
of these.
so they were on high alert.
Okay.
So I pull there, and all these guys come swarm the van, and this one guy, he comes up with a 9mm pistol, has 1 inch from my temple. He goes, don't even think to try anything. I said, trust me, I'm not going to try anything. He says, what are you doing here? I said, and I gave him the story. And then the 2 Marines were like, we don't know him. We're not with him.
Okay.
We were just told to go with it, right? And started sorting out. And then he goes to me, I want to see your driver's license and your registration.
Okay.
And of course, I'm a musician who travels a lot. So I had a Tennessee driver's license and a Florida registration. And he goes very slowly. So I said, it's down here in a little box in between the seats. And he goes, sure it's not a grenade or something? I said, do you think that I'm going to be that stupid? I've got 20 guns pointed at me, right? And if I had done something stupid like, made a quick move and said something like Allah Akbar,
Yeah.
if I had said that then,
Right.
because of the problems that people had with anything Islamic sounding, right? Which is very unfortunate. But if I had said that, they probably would have made me with so many holes, I'd look like a Swiss cheese, a bleeding Swiss cheese. So I very slowly got my documents. I gave it to him. He comes back. He goes, before he goes and checks it all out, he goes, you got a Tennessee driver's license, you have Florida registration of your van, and you're in New York. I said, I'm
with
a
long
musician.
hair.
And so he's looking at me like I'm out of my mind.
Okay.
And he doesn't believe a word I'm saying because of all this.
Of course.
And he thinks that I fit the profile of somebody who's a criminal, right? I've got all these ID from here.
Right.
So I said, no, I bought a van in Florida. I registered down there. I said, but I've been based out of Tennessee. And I'm in New York because I am in the music business. And I'm trying to make it in the business. So it's all very explainable. And so he goes, and they run my name and my info through every law enforcement database in the country, from the CIA to the FBI to the local to everything. Okay. And he comes back and he goes, I'm astonished, young man, you're clean. He goes, I can't believe it.
It's so unbelievable.
Yeah. And I noticed that the way they had their weapons pointed at me, they had them pointed so that they wouldn't hit each other, because one was on the other, 2 or 3 people were on this side of the van pointing, and they were pointing it not like this at me, but like this, so that they wouldn't hit each other if they had to shoot me. So they'd gotten the Marines outside, they'd frisked them and everything. So they let everybody back in the van, and they're like, this guy that was so mean before was like, we got to be careful. We don't know what's going on down here. We're still assessing the situation. So he turned really nice after I got cleared. They let me go. I went down there. So from that point on, we had a little place set up at Ground Zero. We were giving out all these items, and people were bringing everything. And then at night, I would go across the Brooklyn Bridge into Queens and Brooklyn, and I would go to Home Depot or Walgreens pharmacy, and with a letter from the FD, the fire department, and they would give me whatever it is that I wanted. So I remember one night, I went and got this huge load of stuff, and it was pain medication, it was Visine, it was medications of different kinds, bandages, you name it. Some dog supplies, because they had rescue dogs there, dog food.
Okay.
So I'm bringing this stuff back, and it's surreal. The Manhattan is totally dark except for this fire burning. The Brooklyn Bridge, the lights are all off, and I'm being escorted from the front and the back by U.S. Army Humvees with machine gunners.
Okay.
Right? And they're taking me across, escorting me back across the bridge, because nobody was allowed to go into Manhattan unless you were officially doing something.
Right.
So I went back there, and I unloaded all this stuff, and I went back for another round, and I realized as I was going back across the bridge that I had a huge headache. I was like, man, I got a huge headache. And I realized I just dropped off enough pain medicine for the rest of my life. And now I can't even find an aspirin, right? It was kind of ironic, right?
Wow.
But it was very surreal.
Okay.
I was there for a week, but it changed me. And the reason I do relief work now, the reason that I do all this stuff in Pakistan is because what I learned about myself at Ground Zero was like, after I left there, I was like, I feel like that was something I did that actually mattered, that actually had a purpose, and that I realized just by accident that I was good at.